most enormous fun. Thank you very much. Thank you.
I spent a weekend 6 years ago now with a girlfriend, and by the end of the weekend we had decided to start a professional theatre company. Well, I mean, it was near the beginning of the recession. Neither of us had any experience of running a theatre company, but we were both very keen to work with professionals instead of amateurs, and so by Monday morning she was phoning her office and saying, "I'm leaving my job." And so that's how we began. Absolute madness, complete naivety, but the one thing that I knew was that it was going to work. And in all the years we ran, I never once hesitated or veered from that idea that it would work. I don't know where that courage came from, but it was there. I just knew it would work. And it did. In order to run a theatre company, you have to have people to work with you. So I recruited a team, and they were all friends. I bumped into a couple in Boots one day.
I think we first heard about Fast and Loose, it wasn't named then, just before Christmas when you were wearing a very funny hat in Boots.
Cut. That was not a funny hat.
Oh.
That was my best hat.
Well, Celia noticed it.
And she came up to me in Boots and said, "I do love your hat. We must have a chat about something. You'll be interested." Then walked off.
And we thought,
hello. It's Celia's got a plan.
yeah.
And so I said, "Do you want to come and do something for us?"
Then it went to a meeting, didn't it?
Yeah, we had it was Catherine and
Sure.
Celia and us two round our dining room table one Saturday morning.
Yes, in Curzon Road.
When the idea was put forward, and we started them on over. And words jumped out at me. Public funding struck out at me, and professionals on their way up, and Shakespeare, and using proper English instead of East End speak. All those went round in my head, and I thought, this is a good idea.
And interestingly, the male member of the company, Alan, said, "I'll only do it if you're really professional." So he sat in on meetings, and we proved ourselves, and he took over running our finances.
On the commercial side, I wondered whether it would fly, but bless them, they got it going, and going up and go very quickly.
I pulled in Pat Jones.
I'd written a very silly spoof play, which Celia came to see with a friend of hers, and after that they asked me to write the opening show for when they were forming their company Fast and Loose. After that, I became the dog's body for Fast and Loose, which I really enjoyed.
She came in and has been incredible. I've known Leslie a number of years because I taught her son for a number of years, and I used to bump into her and she'd say, "If you ever want any help, if you ever want any help."
I went to a Desborough meeting, and lo and behold, there she was. And she cornered me, and well, that was the start of Fast and Loose for me. And unfortunately fortunately for Linda, I gave her a quick ring and said, we could do with some help. How about coming along to a meeting? And there she was.
That's what happened. I'm Linda. I went along to the meeting thinking, well, they need a bit of help, front of house, maybe serving coffee, tea, etc., etc. I can do that. Done it before. I know Leslie through other drama groups that I've done that sort of role with, really helping backstage. And all of a sudden, I was there in the room with all these lovely, helping, very nice, friendly ladies all saying, "Well, you could do the props, Linda. You could be our props department." And I'm thinking, oh, could I? I suppose I could. Try.
And she and Leslie, between them, were absolutely phenomenal, and they had a ball. My only trouble with them was they just would talk backstage because they were such good friends, but they were absolutely wonderful.
We got told off quite a lot because we were always nattering backstage. But, when you're friends, it's hard to keep quiet.
Oh, that's right. And also we were here to actually enjoy ourselves as well. We did, didn't we?
I think so.
And again, friends that I've pulled in who became extraordinary professionals.
But there was a point when I thought if I was younger, I'd think of going into something to do with the stage, but then not as an acting role.
Well, I don't know. It's never too late, then. You never know.
Well, no, I mean, I don't know, it's funny really.
I pulled in a couple of students of mine, senior students, one of whom was very businesslike and the other who was very artistic, so they have been extraordinarily useful. That's Sue and Shah. I pulled in a young friend of mine who's been my next door neighbour all her life and a very, very dear friend and student, and she stage managed for us every time, and she was 13 when she first did it, and she was remarkably professional even at that stage, and she stayed with us throughout.
I did quite a lot of bits, like different bits of stage managing. I even helped Nigel with the lighting, and I think my favourite bit was doing Dr. Faustus when she was lying on the table and it was literally just, you had to get the timing right when they stabbed the person and the lights go off. That was actually really good.
For photography, we pulled in Pat's next door neighbour, and she was wonderful. She just took so many photographs, it became a joke in the end, but she was just delightful to work with and a lovely person.
Bit by bit I got involved and I took photographs, which I absolutely loved doing, because you saw another side of behind the scenes, how hard the actors work. I have a newfound respect for actors and how hard they work for so little pay, purely because they just love acting.
Later on in the company's existence, one or two of the young actors who are local and friends of mine, but professional nonetheless, decided that they would like to come onto the team and help, and they have been absolutely brilliant.
I sort of got on board as to help out with marketing and a bit of that sort of side of things, which was experience I wanted anyway outside of Fast and Loose.
I'd known Celia for some time, since I was 15 years old, and so the opportunity to work with Celia professionally was amazing. So I instantly took her up on it without even being asked, to be honest.
I seem to remember quite a lot of giggling. No, it was kind of just we were trying to get the social internety stuff. I was good at that. Up and running, so, helping with Twitter, helping with Facebook, kind of the publicity side of things.
And at roughly the same sort of time, we headhunted a young chap called Matt Keel, who is a professional photographer, and he came in and took over when Jackie could no longer do it for us, and he has done some remarkable work and been a wonderful part of the team.
I mean, everyone in the team had different roles, and it was a good team because it was more of a family than anything. Everyone was just there for each other. If you had a problem, you could go to anyone in the team and they'd help you.
Every single one of them has worked like nobody's business for absolutely no fee whatever, only whatever they've spent they've recouped. But I could not have done it without them. They have been quite extraordinary, and I will always be incredibly grateful to them all for their input and their enthusiasm and their ability and their innovation and all those other things that are so vital.
Celia just wanted to let everyone loose with their own abilities and ideas, and that, I think, was the...
and to give them a platform
to
grow as well. Though,
she would talk to different people about different ideas, and then just see which one evolved, and the fact that she let it grow organically.
Sounds good.
It's not a bit of a cliche.
No, but I think that's what it is, though, isn't it? That kind of working and not being afraid of maybe doing something.
She wasn't afraid, and she trusted everybody. Brilliant. So it was good.
The first thing I did when Kate and I decided to start a theatre company was to consult an ex-student of mine who had trained at LAMDA and was consequently a professional actress. What I did say was, give me some advice. She said, feed them. If you can't pay them, which I've always regretted, not being able to pay equity rates, just impossible. If you can't pay them more than their expenses, feed them. And that's what we've done.
The
the food?
Food, I'm sure everyone has talked about the food.
What kind of cake? Well, we've got sticky ginger, raspberry and almond and chocolate fudge. I remembered.
Oh my God.
I can't remember lines, but I can remember
that
cake.
sounds immense.
All actors march on their stomachs, especially at rehearsals on a cold winter's day at the Ambulance Hall in Hersham, after a long trek down from the train for sort of longer travellers like me. Food was quite important, and most places I've worked, there's no food at all.
Most productions I've done where they go, oh yes, we'll feed the actors, it's, you know, a scabby sandwich and a lot of crisps and all that kind of stuff, whereas Fast and Loose actually fed the actors and the crew.
There was this wonderful group of people who came in with baskets of gorgeous food.
Cast of 5, I think we had, who were all at least 10 pounds heavier by the end of the production than they were when they started. These amazing teas would turn up. And
the highlight of any rehearsal, any day in the theatre, any day really, was when Pat or Penny turned up with loads of lovely trays of food.
Gorgeous smelling, gorgeous.
It was really good.
Really lovely. I think in The Alchemist they took it a step further. They kind of had on a Sunday, they had breakfast. Kind of poured
you had
in.
breakfast as well.
The thing I remember the most about The Alchemist were the rehearsal breakfasts we had every Sunday, and they were on an epic scale. We had cooked breakfasts, we had fruit, we had all sorts of weird and wonderful things I've never even heard of were presented and put in front of me, and I just ate it because it was there.
We had eggs Benedict, we had scrambled eggs, we had waffles and maple syrup, all reheated, and the cast just brought it in, and we had this hilarious hour or so of breakfast, and me thinking, we've had this all for you to rehearse, and what are you doing? But it was worth it because it just made all the difference to the atmosphere.
And that's another plus to Fast and Loose, that it was recognised that actors need to eat in order to be able to do their work properly.
My name was shouted across the foyer of the National Theatre, "Food lady!" And when I turned round, there was Chris, who was working there as an usher, to say hello to me. Everybody looked, there was the food lady, it was me.
And so many people have done so much to help.
I think it's.
But the food was really important.
Definitely. I think the sausage, was it Pat's sausage? Everybody coming
Pat's sausage and Penny's sandwiches.
And Penny's sandwiches. And Imogen's
I'm getting hungry just talking
and
about
Imogen's
it.
sandwiches, actually. Imogen.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh, dear.
She made some really lovely sandwiches too.
Oh, dear.
Yeah, gosh, yes. It's a lunch. Coming out today.
I can remember Celia coming in with her ideas for starting a professional theatre company in the borough to bring classics to the borough, really, and to provide a training ground for young actors and actresses, and it just seemed like a really exciting initiative to us.
So Romeo and Juliet was my first acting out of drama school, so I just graduated that summer. So it was very exciting, and the company was great, and I don't think I realised how great it was at the time because it was my first thing out of drama school. So then going on to other ones afterwards, you realise how unbelievably well you're treated with Fast and Loose.
As a professional actor coming straight out of drama school, it was perfect. It was classical theatre, which is often very hard to find to get parts in. Classical theatre for young actors in a professional environment.
I think what was exciting about Celia's ideas was, first of all, the classics, because although both at the Playhouse and at Riverhouse we get a lot of one-night productions, as it were, a lot of contemporary drama, this was quite a bold move to try doing the classics, bring those to the borough, do them for a 2 or 3 night run. And the second thing was to use young actors and actresses, give them an opportunity, help them develop in the classics, again getting away from doing the realism of television.
Fast and Loose has given me an outlet for me to continue what I love to do, and has been a great collaboration of friends and professionals as well within the industry.
Almost without exception, we had people who were fully trained, very often straight out of drama school, mostly very young as a result, but we actually had 1 or 2 older people, and 2 of them were new to the profession. They decided to go into it in their middle age. So it was kind of a new opportunity for them, and that's something that I really loved, being able to do for people.
And I remember one bitterly cold winter's day turning up to an ambulance hall in Hersham to do my audition. And my heart was thumping so hard I thought I would need some emergency paramedics coming in to help me out. And there was this lady who straight away kind of just pulsed with being a lady of the theatre, living, breathing the stage. It was perfectly obvious as she sat there. Wonderful sense of style, beautifully made up, fantastic French bob haircut, and a voice that if I closed my eyes I might have been listening to Betty Davis. And so suddenly I began to think, there's a friend here. It's utterly infectious. If you could bottle Celia and put one of her in every theatre in the UK, you'd be doing very well. I think the 2 things she loathes about actors are arrogance and selfishness, because that'll show up in the production if people start messing about.
I have a problem with people with difficult egos. We all have egos, and actors have to have an ego, of course. But I made a decision right at the beginning of running Fast and Loose with Kate that we would not have anybody with a difficult ego. And for some strange reason, this must have gone out into the ether, because almost without exception, everybody we auditioned over those 5.5 years was thoroughly nice. And I think that's really what made the family feel that everybody keeps talking about, and made everybody on the team feel so happy all the time, and so much part of it, that everybody gelled just absolutely beautifully.
First impressions, cold rehearsal room, very warm welcome.
Being in the company, everyone's so lovely, just really welcoming and friendly, and just a really nice environment to be in.
It attracted a lot of people who just wanted to do good work. You know, we didn't, because it's out, you know, it's not in London, it's a little bit out in the sticks. It wasn't really a chance of having, you know, attracting many industry people in. We didn't really do it for the exposure. We did it because, you know, we loved the play, we loved the company, the director and producer, everybody in it, and we just wanted to make it as good as we could make it. You know, everyone worked together, the collaboration, the mix of people, the way we all just gelled as a company was fantastic. And it's not something which happens often enough.
Everyone got on very well, and there's a sort of trope in acting. In any cast of a reasonable size, what you have to do is find the, I'm going to say unpleasant person. That's not the word I would normally use, but I gather this is going to be transmitted, and if I say that, you won't be able to use it. So what you've got to do is find the unpleasant person, and if you can't find him, that means it's you, because there has to be one by law. But in this cast, there really wasn't one. Couldn't find one, unless of course it was me, which it may have been. But if it was, I didn't notice, so that's fine.
Every time I went to every rehearsal we ever did, it was hilarious. And I used to think, are they ever going to get any work done? But my goodness, they did. The hilarity just helped to make everybody gel. I really think so.
It's like a family. It's a sort of place where you go and there isn't anybody that you don't want to see, or that you don't want to be involved with, or you don't want to have a conversation with.
So many organisations say, what is good about this place is it's a family atmosphere. And then you get in the atmosphere and it's a sort of family that only sees each other at Christmas. But when it comes to Fast and Loose and the people who are involved with it, they always make you feel very welcome. They always make you feel you never leave a rehearsal thinking, oh, I really screwed that up, I hope so-and-so isn't angry with me. Never like that. You're always encouraged. They're lovely, lovely people who I'm, still call friends to this day.
A lot of them have stayed in touch with us and with each other ever since, and we support as many people as we can, and it's just made this enormous family, and I love that. I really love that and feel very privileged that it's happened that way.
The reason that everybody got on with each other and the reason everybody worked so hard is because they saw Celia working so hard at the top, and loving what she did every single moment of it. And that made everybody feel inspired to do it themselves and to be good to everybody else. And all of those actors, every single one of them that I've worked with here, has gone off to take little aspects, a tiny little thing that they learned here, a tiny little thing they felt here, and sort of spread it throughout the theatre world. And that's what's amazing. The great show isn't the show that you think is great in the theatre during the curtain call. The great show is the one that you think about 5, 10 years later. And the amazing show is the one that everybody is trying to recreate in every other show that they do. And that's essentially what we created here. It wasn't people standing and clapping us on the stage. It was people stopping and thinking about us on some idle Thursday. And that's pretty much what was special about Fast and Loose, is you take it away with you, you don't leave it in the barn and go home.
What's amazing about every cast that I've worked with from the company is everyone has stayed in touch and in contact. I've had fantastic nights out with the cast.
We've been on several nights out in London, we've been to support each other's plays.
And it's been absolutely lovely, and I think one of the things that's most attractive about this company, and I think people will remember, is the fact of how much love there was between everyone. And it was fantastic to work with talented, ambitious, great people.
We never treated it as if it was a small company. We always aimed for the best possible.
It's the name of this company. Fast and Loose.
As far as choosing the name of the company is concerned, it was a bit funny really, because I had decided, I'm a Shakespeare freak, and I thought one of the best places to look for quotations is Shakespeare. And blow me, at the end of all the thrashings out, the first name was the one we chose, which was Fast and Loose.
It says everything about theatre really, doesn't it? I mean, fast is an exciting, loose as in a bit bawdy and a bit funny and a bit this, that and the other.
I liked it because he had a slightly naughty frisson, because, you know, and my daughter actually said, "Why are you calling it that? It sounds awful."
The question was, could we wear it across a T-shirt, Fast and Loose? Probably not a good idea.
Well, I wasn't going to, no.
But those ideas came up a lot later.
And we have actually even had some email trouble because people thought it might be something rude. But actually, Fast and Loose is a pub game, and it actually is quoted in 2 of Shakespeare's plays.
We realised that one of our big carrots was we had this absolutely gorgeous building. So people would come down, often from London, and they come to the building and say, wow, this is brilliant.
If ever I could, I would hold auditions in the barn of River House, because when the actors walked in, they said, "Oh, wow."
This lovely place is so many things. It's a proscenium arch, it's theatre in the round, the audience can be right around you. You can do anything with it, as well as poetry and music and recitals and readings and all the rest of it. It's a very special place.
The way the space in the barn was used, because very strange shape, and every production that Fast and Loose has put on has somehow seen it as a challenge rather than a problem, and used the space in the most extraordinary way.
It's got such a sort of presence, you know, when you see the different ways that you can set up the auditorium, the staging, the sound, the lighting.
Oh, staging. That we were good at that, weren't we?
Yes,
Putting the stage.
I think to use the space, it's very different to most other ones, isn't it? Because the audience, it's so close to the action, it almost becomes part of the
studio. It's a really good studio space.
But I think it has more than a studio, because it has more character and more...
Loads of character, yeah.
Isn't it? It's a studio space can be quite impersonal and quite kind of...
Yeah. Yeah, because it's got its own character.
Yeah. And and I think if you use the River House as the River House and use that kind of structure of it, it makes it an amazing space.
And of course Nigel, who's been here from the not quite from the beginning, but for a number of years, who is our River House barn manager, is far more than that. He has been so wonderfully supportive, technically practical. I could not have run Fast and Loose without the wonderful Nigel Greenaway.
Without Nigel, nothing would have happened. Nigel always comes up with a solution,
yeah,
which makes makes the impossible happen quite often. I mean, actually, I remember on the first production, Faustus, David Cottis bowed to Nigel because he had this brilliant idea of using magnets to make the sign of the devil or whatever it was. I've forgotten what you call that sign. And the idea was to have a magnet underneath so that when you dropped iron shavings,
it will turn into that.
Yeah. And David Cottis got off his chair and bowed to Nigel. We bow to you, Nigel.
Yeah. I think it is that Nigel has that kind of, he listens and then comes up with the solution. You go, wow.
Yeah. God.
How did that?
Yeah.
Just, what? How long have you been working on that? And he says, no, I just thought of it now.
The productions were excellent in terms of the verse speaking, the classical drama, but they were also excellent in terms of the design.
I've been fortunate enough in having two of the cleverest designers. I knew I needed a professional designer. Again, I thought it'll happen. And I thought of somebody and I thought, no, he does all the sets for Harry Potter and such like. He'd be much too expensive. And then it popped into my head that I had, not then a particularly close friend, she was more a close friend of my daughter, has become an extremely close friend subsequently, and that's Patsy Fraser.
I've known Celia a long time because she taught my daughters, and we had worked on a few other projects together with Imogen, and one day I got this phone call and she said, I've got a theatre production company, and would you like to help? Or would you like to design?
And blow me down if she didn't say yes, bless her heart.
And that's when the snowball began.
Of course we paid her, but we couldn't pay her what she was worth, and I always appreciated that enormously.
Patsy was fantastic in her sort of accessing all sorts of little knickknacks. And
well, her vision as well.
Her vision, yes, for the setting, the staging, and for the costumes.
Yeah.
It was marvellous, actually. I can't.
Yeah, she could get a little bit of lace and put it round something and it became a costume.
I mean, there was one afternoon I came down and she wanted some stitching done on a machine. And I was like, well, I can sew. But I mean, I wasn't a costume maker by any means, but what we ended up with was like a petticoat skirt or whatever, out of nothing really, and she just had to seem to have that vision.
She finally found that she could no longer afford to work with us, and so I had been recommended by Susan Siegel, whom I've mentioned before, a local girl called Annette Black.
I met Celia in the River House. I had an exhibition and Susan introduced me to Celia and said, oh, Annette, just wait a minute, that's Celia, that's, Annette. And then we just kind of talked a bit and ended up, doing a couple of shows together.
And she joined us in time for As You Like It. Well, again, an absolutely phenomenal designer of costumes and sets, and the most hard worker. We had a bit of difficulty in our last production, and she had too, practical difficulty, and she was in at the crack of dawn, working till the small hours, getting the set and costumes together. Quite extraordinary.
Really, Annette, who made costumes, was a magician. I mean, she worked with almost nothing. And she turned out work that would look wonderful on a West End stage.
There's a difference of putting people into clothes and designing a show, because that means there's all the costumes have a kind of world.
Well, what
all
I
the
liked,
costumes come from a world instead of just putting them in individual clothes.
She also gave an actor immense confidence to be able to talk about his or her clothes. I've worked with costumiers who have a very sure idea you will wear this and only this, and you'll shut up and get on with it. And that doesn't always make for the happiest combination, because an actor must feel comfortable in their clothes in order to feel the part. And with Annette, you could talk to her about her colour of a coat or the cut of some trousers or whatever it may be. And she was a joy. Again, like Celia, very special. And I haven't come across Annette before or since.
The cast normally was really open to these designs and were quite happy to try on anything. And I remember coming in with a leather jacket, a black leather jacket for Much to Do. And I kind of had one actor in mind, and then we all tried it on because it looked quite fun. And then it ended up being with Vicky, who I kind of had in mind, but not in mind. And it was just brilliant because they just kind of embraced the whole idea of this costume is quite important for the character. And they said, oh, as soon as I put it on, I felt my posture going different. And I think especially with Much to Do, we had lots of uniforms.
Yeah.
They felt their posture going, and their kind of they stand different, and it helped their character. And I think that's what is
So
always
it got
nice to
into
hear.
character.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now, Annette has this amazing ability to come up with insane amounts of ideas, just absolute hundreds of ideas, and being able to tweak away at them so that she doesn't come up with one thing, and if you don't do that one thing, she gets very upset. And I think that is, essentially that's how Fast and Loose works. I know Annette is one of the designers that Fast and Loose has had, but I think that's why she works so well here, because she is okay with there being other ideas in many ways that everybody else, especially how Celia is.
If other people have other ideas, it's kind of all works.
Yeah, it was a
kind of
brilliant
weaves in each
cauldron
other,
of-
isn't it? Yeah, of
yeah.
kind of ideas and being
Yeah.
allowed,
Yeah.
isn't it? Because
Yeah.
sometimes you're not, and sometimes you say that's how it is, and you know.
No, very often it's
Mhm.
much more prescriptive, so
Yeah.
you're kind of stuck.
And we are really lucky to be allowed to kind of just
Yeah.
run with the ideas.
What Kate and I decided at the beginning was that we'd put a show together called Cutting the Ribbon, for obvious reasons.
It was based on 4 actors and to show all kinds of things that the company was going to cover, from comedy, music, poetry, classics, everything you can think of. And in the show we had 4 very talented young actors.
The quality of the work that the actors produced was phenomenal, and I'm still proud of it. We did it as a gala performance, so we invited friends and told them to dress up.
I was overwhelmed. I thought, this is terrific. I'm very proud to be associated with this, because there was all these young professionals doing their thing and doing it very well.
We were supported by
Yeah,
local people.
absolutely.
Incredibly well supported.
Yes.
And everyone enjoyed it, and they said it's a great idea. Go and get on with it.
Yeah, I know.
We did.
On the strength of Cutting the Ribbon, I was approached by Elmbridge Borough Council and asked if we would open the annual Arts Festival, which was a huge honour. And as a result of that, we got Pat, who is also a writer, to write the story of Cecil Hepworth, who of course is the local, very well-known filmmaker.
We had 3 actors, and we jumped between the end of the 19th century, 20th century, when Water-on-Thames was the Hollywood in the film industry, and we had a wonderful show.
I wasn't quite sure what to do about a director, because I thought if I start advertising for one, I knew where to advertise. I thought, I don't know what I'm going to get, I don't know what it'll be like. So I went to Saskia Fisher, who was a student of mine, and she had just played Queen Anne for a chap called David Cottis.
I came down here to Walton and I got lost on my way to Riverhouse. I think it was the evening that they had a show on, and I met Celia. And she said, yes, we've got this lovely theatre, but it's all a bit twin set and pearls. We want to do something a bit meatier.
So I did what I have done subsequently, which is to say, what would you like to do?
And she said, are you interested in directing a classic? And I said, absolutely. And she said, okay, can you suggest a classic that we can do with a small number of people? So I said, you can do Dr. Faustus, because you can do Dr. Faustus with a small number of people. And she said, yes, absolutely. And decided to do it pretty much there and then, I think. And that's kind of very typical of Celia. When you put an idea to her, if she goes for it, she goes for it.
So that's what we did.
I think what you had to do to create in that middle section there, which was Faustus, and that's stunning. It was black and white, and it was sleek, it was metropolitan, it had a sophistication. To create that in a small area was really hard, and it was really, really good.
Just kept that really minimal because when I was training, it was sort of black box for a tragedy with Shakespeare and a white box for comedy. again, Shakespeare. And so I made it sort of white because although it's a tragedy, it's sort of black comedy.
She said something really interesting. She said, it's not really a tragedy, is it? It's a sort of dark comedy. And I thought, okay, that's interesting. And that, I think, had quite a big influence on the eventual tone of the production.
Now, I was right, as it turns out. Or at least I think I was, and David seemed to think I was, so that's quite good.
The thing about Dr. Faustus as a play is it's got a really good beginning and it's got a really good end and it's a complete mess in the middle. So basically you have to find a structure that makes it work. It's a play that you kind of have to rewrite. And I had this idea of, it takes place over 24 years, corresponding to 24 hours, and I liked the idea that it was the 24 years leading up to the millennium, so it was from 1976 to Millennium Eve, 1999. And my sister came up to me at the first night and she said, oh, it's got a really good structure. And I said, well, it should have. I nicked it from Citizen Kane. That's basically where I got the idea of telling it all through flashbacks.
Really coming out of loyalty to Celia rather than anything else, because I've seen Faust about 5 million times and I thought I was going to be bored. Well, was I wrong? It was just magical. I was riveted from beginning to end. It got some quality to it that I'd never seen. It was like something I had never seen before.
Had an amazing time doing Faustus. As Lucifer, I got to hit a man's head against a table, but I didn't really do it, but it looked like I did, and that was so much fun.
We had the 7 deadly sins, and Sarah and Lucy and Katie, between them, were playing all 7 deadly sins, and they did various things that were appropriate. And the last one was lechery. So Katie was playing lechery, and she went up to Ian, who was playing Faustus, and after saying a line, she'd kneel down and she'd undo his belt. And Ian had a really hard time not corpsing during this, as you can imagine. So what he used to do was he'd look out into the audience and make eye contact with one member of the audience, and that would stop him from corpsing. And one evening, he looked out, just as Katie was kneeling in front of him, undoing his belt. He looked out, made eye contact with a member of the audience, and it was his mother. And he said to me afterwards, David, I'm fairly certain I'm going to need psychiatric help as a result of this show.
Yeah, The Rivals was great fun. We did it end on, which is quite unusual for Fast and Loose because we have all sorts of connotations with Riverhouse Barn because it's such a wonderfully flexible space.
I was assistant director for that with Celia, which was also a lot of fun.
And I had Patsy to design it and the costumes. It was quite extraordinary.
The Rivals was fantastic.
There is nothing on earth so easy as to forget if a person chooses to go about it. Why, I am sure I have as much forgot your poor dear uncle as if he had never existed, and I thought it my duty to do so. Let me tell you, Lydia, these violent memories don't become a young woman.
It was just a box set, which we decorated and covered in fabric and yeah, no,
Lush.
Well, yeah.
It was lots of velvet as well, wasn't it?
There's a lot of colour.
A lot of colour and velvet
Yeah,
as well.
Yeah, so
Lush.
it was textured and yeah, it's just trying to make it look like a sort of, I don't know, 18th century panelled room, but we didn't have panelling, so we just used fabric and made it quite sort of tall but cosy in the dimensions of the room.
It was a very clever trick of the eye, which was something was done with the angles to make the perspective different. I'm not a physicist. I can't remember how it was done, but it was clever.
She's quite influenced by Vivienne Westwood, so the costumes and the hair were of the period of The Rivals, but with a sense of Vivienne Westwood as well. It was quite extraordinary. And the set as well, really wonderful. I was very fortunate to have her for that production.
It was quite an ambitious one to do on the budgets that were available. So the idea for that was sort of new romantics and 80s music a bit. So they had jeans and then they'd have sort of 18th century jackets and waistcoats and powdered wigs. But then,
a nice combination between
yeah, and
you know,
it actually kind of looked quite quite 18th century.
And I did enjoy being a director. Only time I've done it for Fast and Loose, so that's okay.
Why, sure she won't pretend to remember what she's ordered not. Aye, this comes of her reading.
What crime have I committed, madam, to be treated thus? But don't attempt to extricate yourself from the matter. You know I have proof controversial of it.
And you always knew that, especially about the rivals, that the scene was going well when you would hear Celia laugh a little bit and then Sarah laugh to a level that I can't really put into words. In terms of volume, I don't know if decibels have gone that high.
There was a lot of bravado backstage and a little bit of hijinks here and there, and it was rather good fun.
Backstage, it was just a hoot.
I forget exactly what it was, but we would always come up with a million different permutations we could on the word beer.
There was a lot of young men in the rivals, and they just had this word beer, which they would say at every opportunity in a deep beer voice. If rather than saying hello to anybody or goodbye or you're on next or what time it is, this beer would come out.
And I remember one of them, we'd start coming up with all these song titles like The Beer is Back in Town, I'm Having the Beer of My Life, whatever, Beerhemian Rhapsody. I may have just invented that one, but it should have been in there.
When I said to David, what would you like to do? And he said The Comedy of Errors, I thought, not my favourite play, not one of the most famous ones, but never mind, if that's what he wants to do. David becomes totally inspired when he directs. He's quite extraordinary. And he said, well, I'd like to do it as a Western. And I tried very hard not to make a face of, what's it, The Comedy of Errors as a Western?
I'll chew the centaur to go seek the slave. I greatly fear my money is not safe.
We'd actually discussed a number of ideas, and in all three cases, actually, it was ideas I'd been carrying around for quite a long time. The idea of doing Comedy of Errors as a Western actually went back to a conversation I had in 1984, and I'd been carrying the idea around for the intervening, 25 years?
Set in the Wild West, it had never occurred to me that you could do that with Shakespeare. It was,
Well, you don't expect it, do you? No.
And now you see more, I think.
But I think Shakespeare used to be Shakespeare,
yes,
whereas now it's opened your eyes up.
The thing about Comedy of Errors is it all came from a very simple idea. I said I wanted to do it as a Western. It needed to be somewhere dangerous, it needed to be somewhere with a lot of confusion was possible. And the nice thing was that everybody really went with that.
He set it lengthwise, so the audience sat in 2 rows either side.
And then we had this long, thin sort of catwalk. So that was very interesting, and David's direction was really used that beautifully.
And the main set was at one end, so we had this wonderful yee-haw type bar with the swing doors and everything, quite phenomenal.
So I remember having conversations with Patsy, and she said, we've got to have saloon doors. That was the first thing she said. We've got to have big saloon doors that you can hit and walk through. And they were immensely popular, they were massive, and my big memory of them is that at the dress rehearsal, Emily went through it, and she actually went through it and knocked it so hard that she knocked it off its hinges. So we had to get it back on its hinges for the first night.
The set building was interesting, going around nicking bits of sheds. And Johnny's sign painting, Johnny Pearson, good one.
I made the big mistake of having a small part in that, shouldn't have done that.
Having not lost much wealth by rack of sea, buried some dear friend, have not else his eye strayed his affections in unlawful love. Which of these affections is he subject to?
And she was learning her lines, and she stuck herself in the lift, in the newly installed lift in the barn, and was seen going up and down in an abbess outfit, all white, and looked like she was praying.
She was really nervous, and we found her in the lift rehearsing her lines before she went on.
It was a bit of fun, but I lost my words, and apparently I made them up in rhyming in iambic pentameter, I'm told, when I came off stage. I haven't got a clue. I've been teaching it for so long, I suppose it's automatic. Anyway, I just about got away with it. And had a lovely man playing my husband called Chris Bian. He was delightful and very tolerant of me. I was introduced by the barn manager, Nigel, to a writer-director called Johnny Kemp. And I took him out to tea.
Celia took me for tea at this extraordinarily grand place, which the name of which I can't remember. I think Henry VIII used to go and chase his deers there.
I took him to the Oatlands Park Hotel, which was a very famous house at one time. And I'm a bit of a chatterbox, and I know a lot about local history.
And so I was very keen to do a local history play. And so then it was a question of like, well, what on earth are you going to write about? You know, what is interesting about the local history of Walton and Weybridge?
And he chose the story of the diggers who came to St George's Hill in the 17th century and created mayhem.
But the thing that really caught my attention was the fact that Gerard Winstanley, who is a figure from the Civil War, had led his band of true levellers, who were sort of social, religious radicals, up onto St George's Hill in 1651 and started farming the land there. And they were kind of proto-communists in a sort of Christian socialist sort of way. And so there was a beautiful irony that the first practical experiment in communism took place on St George's Hill, which is now, of course, one of the most exclusive gated estates in the country.
The story was set in 2010 and 1649, so the costumes were covered both periods, which was really fun. So we had corsets and raggy dresses and stuff like that, and then we had modern dress, and we had a chap who was the mother in drag, and that was fun too. Do you remember that?
Sounds a good
yeah, so that was fun, and myself and Nigel had quite a lot of fun driving around taking pictures of large houses locally, where which in theory could have been built on somewhere where Winstanley may have dug. We don't know, but we guessed, you know.
And it is an extraordinary story. They lived up on St George's Hill and had an endless conflict with people living in the area, and it all drew in places in Walton. The manor house is actually mentioned in the play, and the man who lived there, was actually part of the whole story. So it's completely rooted in the area. So it was a really fun thing to research and a really fun thing to write, and something I'm really proud of actually, and I'm really sort of grateful that I got the chance to do all that work and to put that together.
Where Celia did go outside the classics, when we did things like The Digger's Daughter, which was a new commission, linked to our bigger project of the Elmbridge 100 about the history of the borough, they were very exciting developments linked to something classical or something historical, and it was good to be supporting that mix of the two.
We tried to keep it as simple as possible, because if you got literal about the design, it was going to get very, very difficult trying to have sort of people ploughing and sowing and, actually sort of like living in huts. And so we had a big bag of soil, and we had some spades, but that was the only actual literal part of the design. And then we used a lot of audio-visual. We had some fantastic images put together, and they really kind of helped us tell the story without being sort of having to say, and now we are in a park, or now we are on a hill. They were kind of a little bit more abstract than that, and I think that helped. During the rehearsal process, at the same time, off the back of this idea, Celia had gone into a lot of local schools and promoted it, and we were doing workshops at the same time in a mixture of state and private schools in the area, which were great, really great, really worked well. Kids were really engaged, in a very obscure kind of part of history. We're talking about sort of deep revolutionary Christian socialism of the 1650s, which is something which not a lot of kids are going to come across in their history, but because they could relate it to the area, they could relate it to a conflict between people who had land and people who didn't have land, we could do exercises around it, and they really enjoyed it, and the teachers were really positive about it.
The workshop this morning was certainly very well prepared, and really seemed to capture the children's imagination and really inspired them. It's wonderful.
Well, that was good in two ways, because it got us out into the wider community, and also I think it sold quite a lot of tickets, because I think quite a lot of people who'd done that workshop went back to their parents and said, come and see this show. So when we came to production week, we were a sellout. Great, you know, sold out before we opened for a week. We could have run it for 2 weeks, to be honest. Could have run it for 3 weeks.
After that, I was again introduced to a very dynamic director called Bart Lee. Hugely interesting background, and he said, I know, I would like to rewrite the story of the tragedy of Medea.
We looked at the Greek, which would sell to an audience, and we chose Medea as a play. There was a case in the news that year of a lady who had had this horrific time and had actually killed her children in a hotel room in Spain.
She told the Spanish court she had killed them out of love. But Leanne Smith was found guilty of murdering her 5-year-old daughter Rebecca and her 11-month-old son Daniel in Spain in 2010.
It came out in the news and we got it in the newspaper and we thought, right, blooming hell, this is current, you see, this is still happening, so let's set our Act 2 there and then. And so that changed the writing, kept the themes of the play very, very, very modern. So we went from this Greek dream into room 101 of the Hotel Miramar in Spain. And suddenly brought the piece and the themes really, really bang up to date into people's mind, which I think was quite shocking and very, very contemporary, which again was exciting, because that was cool.
The end was based on some recent events that were not that dissimilar and brought it up to date, so it wasn't just that she was evil, it was that she was desperate and she could not see a way forward.
It was incredibly powerful stuff, and he did a brilliant job.
It was a little bit controversial, but we liked doing that.
We used 2 of my students as Theo and Jasmine as the children.
Amazing to just watch these professionals again, and it really gave me something to inspire.
It was really just invigorating to kind of see how it was all coming together, because of course, being the first professional thing I've ever done, I wasn't really aware of how it would all come together in the end, and I think it was quite amazing to see that.
The first half was all mirrored fabric, so it sort of took on different lights. Again, quite minimal because, you know, the budget dictated that, plus it worked, I thought.
They rubbed her with basically glitter in a way, but you know, like the gold, so her whole body was actually just shining, and it worked really well in the light, I think.
Really, she was just pure gold. That was the entire idea of her costume, and it was just shining her in a perfect light. How, she was gold and she was Medea.
We do not wish to fight. We are travellers on a quest for the Golden Fleece.
Yet you raise your swords without a care, killing all for simply being there!
Stop this madness!
Yeah, Rob and his brilliant fight choreography and his attention to detail and his he works so hard on those fights. Again, to have somebody who can come in and do that and be very passionate about it is brilliant.
Fortunately, I got to work with very good actors in terms of the fight choreography. They were very quick to pick it up. They were very open to give input into stuff, which I'm very open to. The swords we used weren't perhaps the best, and we managed to break one in rehearsal. The second one broke during a performance, went skidding across the stage, stopped just before some old lady's feet, who went, "Oh, that was well planned," or something along those lines. I was terrified backstage because I heard it happen.
The genuine sort of feeling of horror when a sword breaks mid-fight. You're like, ah!
So they kind of had to go on and try not to injure each other. And as the audience was leaving after this, we could hear them saying, "Ooh, how did they manage to get the sword to break at that exact moment?" amazing. And we were just like, oh.
It's just the way they quickly changed the situation to a hand-on-hand martial arts thing. So, because obviously one of their swords was broken and the other one had a sword, but the one who had the sword, Jason, was meant to lose the fight. So they quickly managed to somehow create a way where he was disarmed, and it was just brilliant watching that and thinking, oh, that was good.
Yeah.
I think we were all really impressed with the end result that came on. The audiences definitely enjoyed the piece, and it was very different. It was a very different sort of strand, I think, to anything that Fast and Loose had done before. And so excited by this, we said, yes, okay, let's try and tour it, let's take it around. And having had a few contacts with different venues in the past, we took the show, we put it into a van, and we took it around to different venues, and I think probably in about 18 months from start to finish, we reached our ambition of having created a new show, helped by somebody called Jerry Millies, and putting it together and taking it out to different venues. So yeah, we were delighted by that, and it was the first time I think Fast and Loose had gone into different venues to put shows on, or the same show, at a professional level, which we were delighted with.
After that, we decided to take a different tack, and we took a bit of a risk, and the young team and I collaborated on our version of As You Like It, which we called As We Like It. My very talented daughter Imogen wrote the music and helped to put it together as well. We rehearsed in her enormous home, and we had strange props that involved the audience, and singing and dancing, and it was quite extraordinary, and I loved every moment of doing that.
I think one of the things that actually sticks in my mind as well was when they did an abridged version of As You Like It, which was very, very charming and lovely, and we were all sitting at sort of cabaret-style tables, and the play was done amongst us, and it was so beautifully done, and such an entertaining evening. And again, they were not scared to try different approaches to things, and I thought that was quite bold, and we all had a really lovely evening, and it brought Shakespeare into a very intimate, modern setting.
But it's kind of fun kind of introduction, because it was different to all the other shows. It was kind of devised by the actors as well as by Celia. So it was kind of a collaboration between everybody.
I remember we were actually meant to have a part outside the courtyard, but I think we ditched that on the day.
Oh yeah.
I loved coming out with ideas.
Yeah.
I did the newspaper thing.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I've still got that.
Yeah.
And the money with Ricky's face on it, which is still floating around.
Which people actually bought adults, I have to say. People bought that money.
Yes, they did.
Adults.
Yes, they did.
I love
it. And when it was set in the 30s?
In the 1930s. It was lovely because it's kind of the costume, obviously, beautiful silhouettes. You had some balloons. Imogen did amazing music as well.
And therefore take the present time with a hey-ho, hey-nani-no. For love is crowned with the prime.
In the springtime,
the only pretty ring time.
when birds do sing,
Hey ding-a-ding-ding,
Sweet lovers love the spring.
Can't you hear them singing?
Sweet lovers love the spring.
It's all they talk about.
Sweet lovers love the spring. Sweet lovers love the spring. Sweet lovers love the spring. Sweet lovers love the spring.
Woo! That's a round of applause.
Okay.
Oh, I just said woo when I shouldn't have done.
I love that.
The next production we did, we pulled in Bart again, and we did Romeo and Juliet. Bart modernised it.
The conversation that we had wanted to keep everything very contemporary, very modern day, and the riots had just happened. So we thought, what better setting? Young people, youth not being understood. It's happening in our society today. That's what the play is about. So we set the play in the riots in London, and Patsy sort of had an idea to use lots of modern technology throughout the show, which at first seemed incredibly daunting. I mean, is that going to balance with Shakespeare's text or not? Don't know. Blah blah blah. But through the creative process, definitely the modern day themes married in with Shakespeare's presented themes as well.
So street, it's very street, modern street. And you've got the Chavy family, and you've got the sort of, smart, hooray, if you like, family. Just to sort of, sorry guys, you've got to pigeonhole a bit, And so that worked quite well as a concept, as a theory. And then the set was just really minimal. It had, I think we had wire mesh around the platform. We had black rubber floor. We had a black sort of wedge thing that was steps for one half, and then became the tomb deathbed.
The set itself and what we were given, and the scaffolding that we could climb up and down, and the way that it worked with the different levels and the blocks was just fabulous. It gave such a dynamic to the whole production. Complete use of space, because we were sat with audience both sides, and it was just, we got to use the barn doors.
Sarah's face when we said to her, right, we're going to use the doors, we're going to do the party scene, we're going to take off the thing, we're going to open the doors and you're all going to come in from outside. And she went, I've wanted to do that forever!
It's so exciting!
I can't wait! And that would only work here in the barn.
It wasn't as much fun when you were outside, and I think it was sort of snowing a little bit that week in the little party dress, waiting to come in. But as just in terms of kind of the spectacle for the audience, I thought that was really great.
Alack! Is it not like that I, so early waking, what with loathsome smells and shrieks like mandrakes torn out of the earth, that living mortals hearing them run mad?
Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Not being one for Shakespeare, I found it really, really good. I thoroughly enjoyed it, which made me and hopefully others want to see more. Yeah, very good.
And it was a very, very tough and passionate production. I had a hand in some of the direction, as I had a hand when it came to dialogue and using the Shakespearean words, voice work generally, which of course is my forte.
Celia was at a lot of the rehearsals, I think nearly all of them actually, and took a lot of them without Bart as well, and was, I think, to all of us, a massive help with the language.
Take your time over it. Enjoy the words. I've heard myself say when teaching Shakespeare, roll the words around your mouth, enjoy them like a chocolate.
I, as I've already said, absolutely adore Shakespeare, and I'm aware of how clever he was and how subtle what he wrote was, and how much cleverer than we think when you start to pull it apart he was, and also how bawdy he was, which of course appeals to me no end.
Having Celia coming in and being so wonderful in teaching us with our diction and pointing out the little things that nobody else ever tells you.
What's the most important word? Die. Die. So take a bit more time and effort on it.
Die. And I may die there.
That was a sheer delight to have. Because you don't get those opportunities. You don't have great vocal trainers coming in and working with you in rehearsals in every production you do.
No, because then I'm completely wrong and I've got the wrong
do you know, I love it when people are wrong, because it's the best way to get it right.
Okay. So it's got nothing to do with I have big pentameter and so
not strictly speaking, it doesn't.
Because like I say, obviously there's a natural rhythm to the script, which you can beat out.
And this is where it's very easy to get confused.
Right. I remember Amelia and I would be sat backstage, Amelia, Juliet, we were sat backstage, well, on stage, but off stage. We were behind the curtain in the little annex, and we'd just be counting down the first few scenes, and both of us would be saying to each other, I need the loo, I need the loo, I need the loo, I can't go anywhere. And then we couldn't see either, so we had to change there. So do things like put our hair in hair grips in, and we had this tiny little lamp in the corner. But it became our little space.
Oh.
It was our little haven.
We were rehearsing the first kiss between them at the party, and we'd sort of rehearsed it, and that was fine. And then we rehearsed it again, and we did the kiss, and we have to wait for Sarah, who's playing the nurse, to interrupt her. She comes in and shouts for me, and just no one did anything. And we stopped kissing and looked around, and everyone had left the room. Which was a little bit weird.
The one thing that excited me the most and what I enjoyed the most was the fight scenes. They were great, and obviously Tybalt has a fantastic death, which was very enjoyable.
Where bloody Tybalt, yet but green in earth lies festering in his shroud.
What I remember about Romeo and Juliet was right when Tybalt's death scene, and he had to be dragged off stage.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember, I think it must have been on the first night, I think it was, and I remember Bart saying, right, Ricky, you need to not aid them, you need to just let yourself be dragged. And I was like, okay, right, fine, I will. And I remember Rob whispering to me, God, you've put on weight. That was it. I just had this really dramatic death. I was, right, exhausted from the fight that we just had, and I tried to follow direction and just let myself just be carried by the actors, and God, you put on weight, haven't you?
Sorry, I couldn't resist.
No, thanks. Thank you.
Anytime.
Well, then we went back to David. I mean, I just got more and more pleasure out of working with David, and he and I got a better and better rapport as we worked through those different productions. And so we did Much Ado About Nothing. Now, we did that end on as well, but we had a thrust stage with grass and trees, and you name it, we had it. It was very rural. I remember sitting in the audience and watching it and nearly falling off my chair laughing at some of the antics that went on.
There was literally nothing that would have stopped me wanting to audition and be involved.
I'd heard a lot about David Cottis, and I was very excited to work with the man that I'd heard so much about, and he's an extraordinary director.
I'd always wanted to do Much Ado About Nothing set after the Second World War, because it's set after a war, so it might as well be after the war, it seemed to me. And I thought it was worth remembering that a lot of what's good about this country came out of that period, just after 1945. And it seemed to go with the optimism of the play, the optimism of the time. So we ran with that.
It's not the first time that I've seen Much Ado done in that way, but whenever I've seen it done before, the Second World War setting, it's not a real setting, it's Dad's army. And Dad's Army, of course, is made in the 1960s, not in the 1940s. And the whole Dad's Army thing is this stereotyped idea of what Britain in the 1940s was like, but it's not true. Whereas what David did, I mean, he did a lot of research, and all the music, it's all contemporary, and the costumes and so on. And it had much more of a feeling of what Britain in that period was really like, I think.
The great thing, of course, is that my designer, Annette, was from Germany, and we said that at our first meeting. I said, I want to set this play after the war, you're from Germany. Let us never mention the fact ever again.
What I tried to do was to have some nature, after that kind of hope, some grass, some kind of greenery growing. So there's growth out of all the atrocity that happened.
I did feel like I could have a nice sort of 1940s tea there.
We were sat in the garden as it was happening, and I thought that was just lovely. It was done on a sort of thrust stage out amongst the audience.
And I think River House really lends itself to those sort of productions where people actually, you're not just an audience, you actually on occasion feel like you're within the play because it's so intimate.
So we had grass, it wasn't kind of real grass, but I think that was the favourite of all the people when they kind of saw the grass on the stage.
Yeah. I remember we were all just taken aback by the grass.
I
We walked
know!
in and just went, the grass!
The grass!
There's grass on the
stage!
I mean, the set just looked fantastic. It was, it does a lot. I think it does a lot. It seems to do a lot of your work for you when you walk on, and there's grass, there's bunting, there's a trellis. I mean, there's a whole garden there, and all the attention to detail was fantastic. And I think it was a great idea to set Much Ado at the end of the Second World War, and we all went off and did our own research, but
having that, the thought that went into, the costumes and the props were amazing, and the set, and all done on such, at such a limited budget. I think, what was achieved was fantastic, and it was just a joy to go onto that set every night for all of a week and just make that world. And we did what we could in rehearsals, but when it all sort of came together with all the work that Annette did, and
it had still a little bit of that prettiness, what you would find in kind of stately gardens or in nice gardens, and then it started being dug up to grow these vegetables, and we had kind of real vegetables. I tried to kind of be quite realistic, but it's kind of an odd thing to be in theatre, but you know what I mean. It's sort of
Sarah was a land girl.
Yes.
Oh, I loved that. I loved being a land
We could tell.
girl. I did.
I loved the costumes. It's been my favourite of any production I've done, with the costumes and the set as well. But I got such pretty costumes. So I had a beautiful wedding dress and beautiful blue dress with big red roses on, and all 50. It was just and I had my hair done. It was really good.
Conrad was great. Conrad, he had a fantastic costume. There was a bit of kissing. He was a nasty man. It was great. He had a drinking problem. It was fantastic.
It's like David. You didn't have to act at all, Ricky.
No, I wasn't at all. I wasn't. Could you tell?
There was a props list, and we were all asked, does anyone have anything on this list? Can we bring it in? And in fact, the thing that I will remember is that on this props list, I mentioned earlier, we had the handcuffs. And when it came to it, we ended up with no fewer than 4 sets of handcuffs. And why it is that so many members of the cast, in fact, have access to handcuffs is something we never got to the bottom of. So I shall be wondering about that in years to come.
While David was directing Much Ado About Nothing, he used an assistant director called Eyal Israel. When we left River House after the last performance, we were all in the car park, and I said to Eyal, "How do you fancy directing the next production?" And he said, "Yes."
As we were doing the Get Out from Much Ado About Nothing, as I was walking out, I remember the next day, Celia came up to me in the car park and just said, "So we're thinking about doing something at the end of this year, late or beginning of next year. Would you be interested?" And I just said, yes, of course I'd be interested. Why would I even have to think about that question? It's a wonderful group of people to work with. I'd be mad not to do it.
So lucky us, we had Eyal, who already knew us as a company, to direct our final production. And my goodness, did he make a good job of it. It just was quite extraordinary.
I said, yes, what play would you like me to do? She said, whatever you want, as long as it's not Shakespeare, because you've done enough Shakespeare here, apparently. So I went, fine, let's do something absolutely bonkers that everyone's going to have fun with, which is how I came up with doing The Alchemist, which ended up being quite bonkers.
I have to say, when I read the play, I panicked, because I simply couldn't understand it. And I tried the first scene and I put it down, and I thought, the audience will never get this. What have we done? But it's what Eyal wanted to do. And I thought, trust. Trust has been crucial for the whole 5.5 years. I have trusted.
They were not afraid to tackle really difficult plays, and sad though it was that the company closed, the fact that their last production was The Alchemist, which is so difficult to do, with a young cast who were absolutely magnificent and a very interesting style and design, I just thought was very brave, and the whole thing had been well worth supporting.
And the thing about Mr. Israel is that he sought, once again, in a different style to David, but to produce a play that people would understand. Because it is complicated, fiendishly so, and it has to move at a terrific pace. It's a farce, really, in many respects. And again, I learned, because I hadn't done that kind of play before.
The costumes, they were quite fun. We kind of, I think,
they were really fun. 80s.
So kind of early 80s. We didn't go kind of neon colours and garish. We kind of tried to have a little bit of early 80s. So we had some shoulder pads, of course.
Reminds me of my youth.
Do you want to admit to that?
It's about what works best for the production. And I think that's important, and that's what I did with Annette when we first started working on the design for The Alchemist. She turned around and said, I think he should be this, I said, I think he should be that, and he ended up being neither of those two things, something in the middle. And that's really, really important and really fun to do.
And Eyal it's very good. He kind of listens to things, he kind of says, oh, I think he once said to me, just create me a playground, we can kind of work with that. Because it's...
Did he?
Yeah, we had a turnable stage, and it's it wasn't kind of, high-tech where you have an engine turning it. You physically had to turn it, and suddenly the whole turnable stage just turned the wrong way and got stuck, and yeah, there was lots of fun, lots of people going, yep.
The revolving stage and the house that turned around, and the worry even the day before we actually did this that it got stuck. And this is always the stuff of which nightmares are made of for a company doing a play with a very complicated set. And I seem to remember there were all sorts of people sweating and pushing to make sure that the house turned, and I couldn't come on until it did.
So The Alchemist itself, it's a story about greed, really, and about greed and what people would believe in order to get more.
Fool's gold.
Yeah. So there's people kind of, on one hand, they're desperate to believe in anything, and so that kind of turnable stage came in quite handy. So it's like a cauldron of ideas, a cauldron of
and changing fortune.
Changing fortune. But this kind of, if you have a cauldron or if you have a roundabout, then you don't know when to stop and when to get off, when is the right time. Anything could happen. And that's what happens in the play. They didn't know when to get off, they didn't know when there was the safe point to jump off the roundabout.
There was this kind of unsaid desire for it to be the best, and for the company to go out on a bang.
Again, it was an extraordinarily happy time, and again, I sat in the audience and I just was overwhelmed by the quality of the work. As a director myself, I can often sit and pick holes in things. I've done so at the National and the RSC, shocking really, and I couldn't pick a hole at all. It was just magical to sit and watch this final production being of such a high quality, as they all had been. And it's really, I can only say we went out with a bang. I've said about Fast and Loose creating a kind of family where people stay in touch and keep in touch. Well, Fast and Loose has had a baby. And one of my students who was with me from the age of 6, Stephen Willis, has actually set up his own company.
There's a company that has risen from Fast and Loose, which has closed, but a new theatre company's come out of that, I guess, a little bit like a phoenix from the flames, which is fabulous, and it's being run in a similar way.
I am told that it works along the lines of Fast and Loose and involves Fast and Loose people in his team. And I can't tell you, I feel quite emotional telling you that it is absolutely wonderful to mother a child. And I just wish Stephen and his crew all the very best.
Something that I've watched with a great deal of interest and pride for Celia is that she has produced a family of people that make up Riverhouse and Fast and Loose. A family of people who maybe she taught and tutored when they were 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old, who are now in professional productions here and acting elsewhere too. And that's a special talent because it's passing on the story, passing on the skills that she has taught to people who can then get up on a stage here and entertain people.
It's been wonderful, and the only reason it's folded is because funding became impossible, and I had to dip into my own pocket for the last 2 performances, and it couldn't go on. So sadly, the recession finally did get to us, and we had to close. But it's out there in the ether somewhere. The magic of it, and those 5.5 years will never die.
it's obvious that the company was everything and still is everything to Celia, and it's a terrible shame that it's had to finish.
It's very sad.
Yeah, very sad indeed. A good idea that was on its feet and prospering suddenly cut off because people have no idea how much it costs to put on even a small production, and as usual the arts come at the bottom of the list.
Running any sort of theatre company is, particularly in these recessional times, is such a struggle. And it's such a struggle to constantly be trying to raise finance for what you want to do. So I can absolutely understand that over a period of time that becomes exhausting, and it tends to overtake the artistic side of what you want to do. But I just think that what the Fast and Loose achieved in the time that they were in existence is a really wonderful legacy. And although it's tinged with sadness, I think everybody involved should just be very, very proud of what they achieved. And it set a very high standard for any other company that wants to be set up in the borough, I have to say.
When it sort of came to a close, that's why it's just been so sad, but at the same time it's one of those bittersweet things, because look at what you've got to look back on, and the friendships that you've made, and the experience that you've had.
Fast and Loose was a bright, sharp company, very professional. Celia committed to the hilt.
It attracted good audiences, it brought classical theatre to the borough, and it was just a really exciting 5 years, I think, and well worth doing.
This magic thing, I don't know what it is. It's more than that. So you know how they say about something is more than the sum of its parts. Well, that's what Fast and Loose has seemed to me to be, more than the sum of its parts.
Lots of fun, lots of panic.
So many funny things that I can remember, so much laughter that I've had being a part of Fast and Loose, which I don't think I would have got anywhere else. I think off stage, one of my fondest memories from our Fast and Loose meetings was the time when Celia got cramp at Pat's house. And I can just remember her leaning against this fireplace, going, ow, with her leg extended, and Penny saying, I'll help you get rid of it. And Penny's bent over her, rubbing her leg up and down like this, going, are you okay? Is that getting better? Is that getting better? And we all just sat watching this. And of course Celia, I love Celia, when she laughs, she coughs. And so she had this massive coughing fit. So there's Penny on the ground going like this on her leg, trying to relieve the cramp. There's Celia coughing and spluttering and laughing. And I just, oh my gosh, I've never laughed so much in my life. It was brilliant. I think that sort of encapsulates everything about Fast and Loose. It's laughter. It's not just getting the huge mammoth task, which I think Celia always handled so well, of getting a production together, finding the funding, putting it on, finding the actors, sorting it out, the stage management, creating the set and everything, that the team really just everybody just did so brilliantly well. It wasn't just that, it was the fun and the laughter and the memories that were created around it, and that's what made Fast and Loose the family that it is. And I think that's probably why so many people like myself kept on coming back and doing more productions, or just never left.
Met some wonderful young people who I think have all gone on, most have gone on to do something and enjoying what they're doing. That's the main thing.
Yes.
The end of Fast and Loose was very emotional. It was a good ending though. It showed how much hard work we did and how everyone came all together, and we were a good family in the end. But none of it would happen without Celia. She was the light in the end of the tunnel. She's always there. If you need anything, she'll always be there for you.
Everyone involved in the production worked hard, but no one worked harder than Celia. Far too hard, really.
Oh yeah.
Far too hard.
It was.
But it had to be done, and she did it. She accomplished it, and well done. Because even though it's not going any longer, people will remember it, and it might re-emerge. Who knows?
I think we just have to say thank you, Celia.
Celia, thank you.
Yeah, I think with your vision, we would not.
Yes, and seeds you've sown.
Yes.
But I know Fast and Loose will make its way back It just has to, and the person who will be making jolly sure it does is Celia.
There was a hugeness of vision. It seems like people working on these productions had no limits. Their vision was so big, dreamt big, and just wonderful stuff. Enjoyed everything. Yeah, really, really good stuff.
And I know it's early days, and you can say, well, I haven't learnt it yet, and all the rest of it. Oh, Stephen. Stephen's got so many shots of me. My vanity never existed, and if it ever did, it's gone out of the window now.